I have a bit of a dilemma when it comes to what to do next for the TT. We're in the middle of tuning the car, so we need to complete that. But it's also the time of year to put on snow tires, and past a point, I shouldn't wait too long to do that. After all, the weather is not going to wait for me. So that's the issue. It's a time crunch. The snow tires are much better for the impending season, however they won't grip nearly as much as the tires that are on the car. So actually enjoying this car on back roads will be different. Not impossible by any means, but we won't be able to push it as hard. So in other words, we've got a lot to do this week. Continue tuning the car, find some time to enjoy it, and finally prep it for winter. And with that big of a list, we ought to get started. And the very best place to start is right where we left off. A couple weeks ago, while loading up tires for the S4, I was actually also uploading the tune for the TT. I know, multitasking. But that means this car is running more boost than where we left it. How much, we don't really know yet. That's why we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's time to do another wide open throttle log. We need to do a third gear pull all the way to redline. This is going to let us know if we have hardware limitations and how we can improve the tune. And based on the weather, we're likely going to have to do a couple of these until we get one where we don't lose traction. Even with good tires and all-wheel drive, traction control is absolutely still popping on, which you can see in this pull right here. The second we hit that bump in the road, it cut power. So we basically need to do this until that doesn't happen. And I guess there's definitely worse things that I could be required to do. It looks like with this current tune, we're hitting about 17 PSI at peak, and that is a decent jump from the 15 we hit last time. My tuner and I share the same philosophy of approaching goals like this progressively, so we'll just keep doing this until the car is where we want it to be. On my way back, however, is where I started to realize that every other of my cars is prepped for winter already. The S4 has wheels and tires for winter, and for that matter, now so does the E30. And unlike those two cars, I actually already own wheels and snow tires for the TT. So maybe I should just put them on now. And this is where the dilemma started. Should I prep for the future and get the car ready for snowy weather, or should I push my luck and plan to do that later? However, if I did that, it's not like the weather won't get worse before it gets better, and I don't want to be forced to install the snow tires on a day like this outside. So I had a lot to think about, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to at least get them out. But I'm also in the middle of tuning the car. So, would it be a bad thing to stop that? I could spend this weekend prepping for the future, or I could enjoy the present and continue what I was working on. The safe option, or seeing how lucky we feel. One step at a time. First things first, winter tires or not, we need to get this log sent over to the tuner. We don't know what their schedule's like, so I don't know when I'm gonna get the new revision back. So in other words, right now, that is probably the best use of our initial time. But while the log is over in his hands, the car is still in ours. And while we wait for the tuner to get back to us about the log, I figure it is a fantastic time to install something this car has been long needing. If you've been around the channel for a while, you might remember a ways back we upgraded the boost gauge in the car. I adapted this OSR gauge pod kit to fit with this platform. There's something a bit wrong here though. And if you're observant, you might have noticed that these two gauges are identical. So I think it's time we swapped the one that's not being used. And for the replacement, we've got a wideband gauge. It's never a bad idea to have a wideband O2 sensor on your car whenever you have a big turbo or you've done anything super custom. Basically just lets you know how lean the car is running. And yes, there's a ton of different brands you can go with for a wideband AFR gauge. This matches the boost gauge, so it's what I went with. And if you've never installed one of these, it is slightly harder than installing a boost gauge, but only slightly. Everything is ran through this computer, and all the cables run directly to it. The gauge connects with a wire, and there's a cable that powers the computer itself. We also obviously have a harness that connects to the wideband O2, plus there's also an optional one for data logging, but we're ignoring that.
And for the most part, this install should be fantastically easy. I had the downpipe built with a flange for a wideband O2 sensor, and when we installed the turbo kit, I installed an extra wideband O2 sensor. We also have an extra gauge pod in the car that currently just has an unplugged boost gauge. So we have a place to put it. And this was the plan all along for what that second gauge was supposed to be. We just had a long road to get there.
The only thing that makes this install harder than a boost gauge is you need that extra O2 sensor in the downpipe, but with it, the installation is super simple. We just need to go from cable to cable and route them to that computer. The one I want to do first is likely the most important. If this computer doesn't have access to the extra wideband O2 sensor, it has nothing to show. So we need to route the included cable from the O2 sensor in the engine bay to the inside of the car. And to me, it was easiest to just use the same routing we did for the boost gauge. So we have to remove the glove box. A few screws later, the glove box pops down and you can see just the routing I'm talking about. We're gonna follow this hose through this hole. And this hole is right behind the cabin air filter. And this is gonna work extra well because the cable from our O2 sensor sits on this side already. It's almost like we planned it that way. Now here's where things can get just a little frustrating if you don't know the trick. There is just about zero clearance to get this cable back there. And since the cable is limp and not straight, it's not exactly easy to route it. And we can't route it the other way because the end that would go through and connect to the O2 sensor is too large to fit through that hole. So we need to figure out a way that doesn't take forever to get it back there. And my preferred method is to use sculpting wire. Yet another reason you should definitely get some. You can mold this with your hand and it holds its shape well enough to be guided through from the bottom. And once it's up there, you can look above the cabin air filter to see just where the wire popped out. All we have to do from here is connect the two and pull it down. And if this idea works, it should be pretty easy. Thankfully, my idea did work. The cable was routed, and that was the biggest unknown of this entire job. And if you're wondering, the grommet to weather seal it will go back on, I just need to cut it to adapt around this new wire. I hopped back over to the engine bay and I plugged in the O2 sensor. We're gonna reroute and tuck all the wiring once it's all working, but for now, I want to at least test this. There is a ton of extra slack though, which makes sense since the kit isn't exactly designed for this car specifically. With that, however, this wire is pretty much done and we can reinstall the glove box. The next one we need to talk about is how we're going to power this gauge. I first unplugged the battery and then hopped into the driver's side of the car to give the underside of this dash the same treatment as we gave the glove box, and the same screws hold it in place. With this panel removed, you can see the wonderful collection of wiring that's already down here. A poorly wired radio from the previous owner, and the wiring that I used for the boost gauge. At some point, I would like to clean all of this up, but for now, I just want to get this gauge working. We have 4 wires, and we're going to route them to 3 different places. And it's extra easy to me because these wires are identical to the boost gauge. The yellow goes to direct power. This has power no matter if the engine is on or off. Key in or key out. And the main reason it's needed is so the device can store information while the car's off, like the color you choose, for instance. The red wire goes to the ignition controlled power, and the orange one goes to the dimmer switch. But if you don't care too much about adjusting its brightness with the brightness switch of the car, you can just wire it with the ignition switch to the red power. And the final wire, as you probably guessed, is ground, and you can use whatever ground you so prefer. These brown wires are great options. And like I said, it's not the prettiest wire job, mostly just because of what was already here, but this is definitely going to be functional. And if you don't already have boost gauge wires to tap into, this is where I'm getting these power sources. The far left is ignition power, and the one right next to it is constant. With that, however, we're good to start plugging everything in, and that means the gauge can go into the pod, followed by all the cables into the computer. Now that the gauge is technically wired and plugged in, it's a good idea to test it before we go too much further. I would hate to reinstall the kick panel only to find out it wasn't working and I needed to take it off yet again. So in other words, let's test it now. The gauge has this little dance or boot sequence or something like that it does every time you put the key in the ignition, and it doing that is a sign that we did it correctly. So we can proceed to the next step and reinstall the under panel of the car.
With the tune sent over to Motiza and the new gauge installed, I figure we might as well go enjoy the car a bit more, since this was one of the last days we'd have the car on its nice summer tires.
Well, at this point, you're probably wondering if the gauge works and what it looks like. And the bottom line is, yeah, it works and it looks great. I still have to mess around with what color and display format I want it to have. I think the gauge can display the value in a number of ways, and I'm not too sure what it's showing right now. But the good news is that it's actually reading. I definitely don't know if the value's accurate though. The extra O2 sensor's been in there for a little bit while it was unplugged, so there's a good chance it's slightly fouled up and we need to clean it. But baby steps. Cosmetically, this gauge is absolutely gorgeous, and if you set both of them to red, it matches the interior of the car really well. The goal with the look of this car's interior was OEM plus, and I think these absolutely fit that bill. Definitely more so than having an unplugged boost gauge there. In other words, I am absolutely thrilled with how much this improved the interior.
In contrast to the first day, the next day was absolutely gorgeous. Sweater weather. So I decided this would be a perfect day to install the winter tires.
And unlike the S4 and the E30, the TT is not getting new winter tires this year. We're gonna rock the same setup that we had last year, the Fat 5s. It's an OEM wheel, and it's a very good-looking one. It suits the car well because it was designed for this car. And the best part is we already know that they fit well. All we have to do is swap lug bolts while we swap the wheels.
Now, I'm always pretty excited to put the Fat 5s back on the TT every season. I really like that design and it's timeless. But this year I am especially excited because we have a new color on the car. so we're gonna get to see what that looks like.
Every single time, without fail, that this time of year rolls around, I always get to thinking about seasons, and furthermore about time. You see, some people like having nice weather all the time. They like going outside and it's always 70 degrees and sunny. Well, weirdly enough, I don't know if I can exactly say that I do. I mean, I like good weather as much as the next person, but I don't think I could ever live somewhere where it was identical outside every single day of the year. And the more I think about that every year, the more I realize that that has to do with the passage of time and the perception of its passage. Maybe it's just my subconscious, or maybe I'm just reading into this too much, but in my brain, different times of the year correlate to different temperatures. So if the weather never changed, I really don't know how my brain would interpret the passage of time. In my mind, it's almost like you would be stuck in a bubble or something. To me, it's that variability that makes it feel like time is passing, working towards something. And in my mind, you can't really have good without bad to compare it to. Otherwise, it's just there. So in other words, I look forward to all the seasons. And I especially look forward to the different look and feel that winter wheels cause on your car. There are pros and cons to the wrap we did to the TT. Silver cars look good with just about any color wheel. So the whole time I was wondering just how the winter wheels would look on this wrap. And thankfully, they look fantastic.
And to be brutally honest, I really like how the silver looks with this blue vinyl. It looks great.
Some people might say these wheels are boring, but through and through, I think these wheels are for the TT. They fit the styling of this car better than any other wheel I can think of. So in other words, they're always going to have a place in my heart when I think of this car. And just like last season, I am absolutely thrilled to have them back for this part of the year. And after a couple tests, I think they're even going to work to help us continue tuning. So we've got that to look forward to as well. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. Right now, that's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.